Now on BBC World News, Hardtalk asks tough questions in interviews with people shaping the news this week.
Welcome to Hardtalk. I'm Stephen Sacker. What impact will the election of Donald Trump have on global geopolitics? Well, judging from the expressions of alarm coming from Eastern Europe, it could tilt the balance of power decisively in favour of Russia as regional tensions rise. But is that just scaremongering? My guest today is Lithuania's Foreign Minister, Linas Linkevicius, who recently described himself as very afraid of Russia's intentions. Is it time for him to calm down? Linas Linkevicius, welcome to Hardtalk.
Thank you.
Just a few days ago, you did something really extraordinary. You told your own people that you were feeling very afraid. Why did you do that?
Let's accomplish sentence to the end, because it's no reason to go to the extremes. To be panic or to be relaxed, we should find some middle approach, I believe.
Very afraid because of Russia's intentions, you said. You said that over the next couple of months you feared...
To be precisely, I was talking about a period before new administration in the US will assume responsibilities. It's end of January, much time to go, and I was talking about that sensitive period. And we should be very vigilant, I said. I was
said
afraid
that the Russians may, quote, step up aggression. Russia is not a superpower, it is a super problem.
Yes, indeed, because, well, GDP of Russia less than Italy or other European countries. They do have nuclear weapons, unfortunately using that in the rhetorics. But the rest is very dangerous when they are testing, probing, testing reactions, whether somebody will do something at all, if something happening in the world. And this period of uncertainty is really a period for testing of all of us, of our leadership, of our resilience. And that was my point. So I was afraid that something will happen in Ukraine or in Syria. Aleppo will be smashed from the ground, for instance, by that time.
Yeah. I mean, I think today we're not going to talk so much about Aleppo. We're going to talk about what you fear might happen in your own country and your region.
But my country is not isolated. We're living in the continent, which is also surrounded by the tensions. So I'm talking...
Of course, but every politician has a choice. You can either seek to calm situations down, or you can stoke the flames of tension and potential conflict. It just strikes me as odd that your government, and I'm just looking at the record of the recent past, you've reintroduced military conscription, you've produced a pretty amazing pamphlet which advises the civilian population on what to do in terms of an invasion from an enemy, and one can only assume you meant Russia. You've also launched a telephone hotline for citizens to report on anyone they suspect of being a spy, again, seemingly aimed at Russia. What on earth is going on?
No, on the earth is going very normal things. Really coming back to my...
normal.
No, look, I know these emotions are important, but it's very important really to find this middle, so to say, position. And we shouldn't scare our people more than it's needed. We also shouldn't relax too much. That's the point. And to do ourselves what we have to do. When we are talking that NATO must remain capable, must react to the current challenges, and it's done, by the way, it's in the process. Decisions which were taken in Wales and later in Warsaw being implemented, and we're very happy with the process, regardless the noise and propaganda. But while expecting that NATO will deliver, we have to do ourselves. So what you mentioned, conscript army. I was former defense minister. Frankly, I was never in favor of abolishing conscripts, but this is now we are back to that. Increase of defense spendings. right? That we are criticized even by President-elect Trump, you know, about spendings. It's legitimate criticism, by the way, but we will give no arguments to skeptics or critics that we will do that, and we are doing already. And the dynamics of the defense spendings increase the best among NATO now. So we are doing what we have to do ourselves.
You've raised the spending issue. I was going to save it for a while and get to it later, but let's get to it right now. It's pretty extraordinary as you're telling your own people, family by family, that they should prepare for the possibility of an invasion. You're telling them to look out for spies at home, but your government doesn't even pay the NATO threshold of 2% of GDP on defense spending.
Yes, I agree. So why it is not fact which we have now? It's a bit different. We are paying our dynamics of increase the best among NATO now. We're paying 1.8, and by 2018 will be 2%. And,
but it makes it seem like you're crying wolf a little bit. You know, you do all of this stuff, telling your own people they're in grave danger, but you don't even get serious enough to spend 2% of GDP on defense.
You would be right if you would criticize me some years ago, but you are not quite correct because we're talking now. And this is commitment shared by all political parties, is sustainable, and really no reason for whomever to criticize in this regard. But we have all Europeans, we have to be serious on this, and defense spendings, as you know, we are, as you said, right, or I said, 1.8%, but we're number 7 among allies, so it's also
at the heart of all of this.
Few of allies fulfilling this threshold. That's
when we'll get back to that later on. But at the heart of all of this is your contention that Vladimir Putin represents a real threat to your region. Yes?
It would be a bit not correct if we'll talk just about our region. I think it presents a threat to all the world.
But I want to know, what is your specific evidence? Because I'm very mindful that Moscow responds to the sorts of things you say by saying, you've got this the completely wrong way round. We in Russia are responding to NATO expansionism. NATO is putting more and more troops on our western flank. NATO is putting elite forces into exercises unprecedented in the history of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization right on our border. It's NATO that's flexing its muscle, not us.
Yeah, this is very good tricks of their propaganda. They use that from all the time. They're very gifted in swap sites to accuse others what they're doing themselves. It's also working quite fairly. And those who are experts and knowing the situation more precisely, they know that it's nothing even to compare when we're talking about number of troops on the border, jets, activity in the vicinity of our airspace or territorial waters, or number of snap exercises, or concentration of new weapons, be it Iskander, S-400 or modernized jets, nothing by far to compare.
You talk about the Iskander missiles.
For instance.
Nuclear-capable missiles put into Kaliningrad,
no, but
obviously very close
to
your territory. But the point is, the Russians say, we see what NATO's up to. There were 4,000 troops in Lithuania on the Operation Iron Sword exercise. I just went to Poland earlier this year, spoke to General Ben Hodges, the chief of the US commander of NATO forces. He was telling me about all the preparations they are making to repel a Russian attack with vast numbers of troops in a rapid response force. NATO is making these plans right on Russia's border. What's Vladimir Putin supposed to do?
So he says that, but again, as I said, nothing to compare when we're talking about numbers, about frequency of exercises. It's by far not compatible. And they're accusing others, NATO, that they have to use these responsive measures, but in fact we are using that. But we are not going to compete. We're not going to escalate. It's also very important. But at the same time, no one should doubt that we will make sure that our security is guaranteed. That's also true.
The new element of doubt, because everything we've talked about has been unfolding over months and months and years.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, the Russian intervention in Ukraine was a key moment for you, particularly in your region, and you got very worried about that. But the key new element that we have to wrestle with today is the election of Donald Trump in the United States. How can I put this? How rattled, how shocked were you and disappointed by the US election results?
It's no need and no reasons to be shocked or disappointed. We should face reality. We should respect decision of Americans and work.
But you didn't want Trump to win, did you?
Why? I didn't comment. You will find
It's very obvious why, because Donald Trump has made it plain that he has an admiration for Vladimir Putin. He wants to work much more closely with Vladimir Putin, and his intention and his priority is to work with the Russians on counter-terror.
Yeah, I
and
know.
not get so worked up about what Russia is doing in your region.
Okay, let's talk not about everything at once, but about some fragments. He criticized NATO, right? And
He's criticised NATO a great deal and says that unless NATO is fundamentally reformed, he's not interested in it.
I can imagine that businessman Trump was briefed about NATO because he was not very much involved in foreign policy, right? It's obvious. It was not part of big deal of campaign. It was discussed other issues, but not foreign policy or NATO. And he was briefed how NATO works. And he was informed that the US should pay 70+% of NATO bills. Of course he was not happy. Of course he criticized. So I take this as a message, as a reminder, or frankly speaking, enforcement, what we are doing. And I agree. Maybe it was done in the way, quite sharp, but he was right.
Well, I hate to gravely disappoint you, but here's a quote from Donald Trump in the year 2000, not just because he's been briefed in the last few months. He said this in 2000, America has no vital interest in choosing between warring factions whose animosities go back centuries in Eastern Europe.
Okay, I got. You can mention even more statements, but you agree. There was electoral campaign, there were some statements, there were some corrections.
But this is what Trump actually thinks. You're going to have to get real and deal with it.
But we also know that after elections, period coming when responsibility comes. And when administration is in place, they have to be responsible for everything. And I cannot imagine that we know continuity in US policy. I simply cannot imagine.
Well, I know foreign ministers have to be pretty diplomatic, but be honest.
I'm not diplomatic, I'm telling the truth.
Good,
you see,
all right. Well,
there are many examples in Europe.
Let's have the truth then on this one. When Newt Gingrich last summer, who was obviously a close advisor and supporter of Donald Trump, he said, quote, Estonia is in the suburbs of St. Petersburg. 40% of Estonia is Russian. I am not sure I would risk nuclear war over some place that is in the suburbs of St. Petersburg.
Well, to say that he was correct, it would be really too much, right? To put it mildly.
I'm simply pointing out that these are the kinds of people that Donald Trump is taking his advice from and getting his mindset from.
Okay, I met other quite close to President-elect Trump, Rudy Giuliani, former mayor of New York. We met before elections. We talked about Baltic states, about energy security. He was very passionate, very enthusiastic about Baltic states. We're not talking much about security issues, but in general, I cannot imagine he changed his mind. So there are more examples. Again, I'm not advocating statements made by Mr. Gingrich which were really not correct. And we were not happy with these statements because they were really not polite and frankly wrong. Obvious. Estonia is not suburb of St. Petersburg.
No, I think that was what we could call a rhetorical flourish.
Yeah, it is.
But if we take away the rhetorical flourishes, what I would say to you is that the evidence is, and leave aside the detail of Trump, because it's yet to be seen what he's actually going to do, but the mindset in Washington as a whole, and one could even say that Barack Obama shared this to a certain extent, is to question the utility of NATO as it works at the present time. Would you accept that?
No, I do not accept that. NATO is really one of the most successful organizations in the history with regard to security. Everyone knows that. Those who not just briefed but also informed properly. I have no doubt that it will be set to the normal proper places. There was a phone call between Secretary General of NATO and President-elect recently, and the readout was very positive, if we remember. I believe US, I have no doubt, will remain not just key player in world security affairs, but also leader of NATO. It will happen. And by the way, we shouldn't just put aside argument that, you know, a team is coming and 4,000 plus officials will be appointed, approved by Congress and Senate, and we know in which hands Congress and Senate. They will come from Republican pool, which is well known. I cannot imagine, I could imagine corrections, some nuances, but I do not agree that could be some revolution, U-turn, or some major, so to say, changes in the traditional positions of United States.
I just think perhaps you're missing a trend in the United States. I interviewed Robert Gates not so long ago, a former defense secretary. He said the US Congress is not interested in funding NATO in the future.
I was present during his speech in Brussels. I was present.
Yes, so you know where he's going from.
Well,
you know that President Obama used the phrase free riders when he was so frustrated with some members of NATO that don't pay their way.
And he's right.
Exactly. So how are you in Lithuania, and let's face it, you're a small country of 3 million in a very big organization. How are you going to persuade those so-called free riders that unless they step up to the plate, they are jeopardizing the very future of the organization?
Learning by doing. You know, when we try to draw attention of the world, I would say, after a war in South Caucasus, 2008, not long ago, right? We all remember. We were condemning what happened. We made statements. And in few months, we got back to business as usual because there were calls to be pragmatic, diplomatic, you know, because economy, trade is important. And we told that we are wrong. We should be consistent. We're not talking that anybody should believe what we are saying, but frankly speaking, if we doubt we're saying ourselves, how they should respect our decisions. And that was lessons which were not learned by us, were learned by others, by Russia. And they realized that in 21st century, it's possible to redraw borders of Europe with a little damage, frankly speaking. And that was first, so to say, not first even, but it was one of the lessons, 2008. And we told at that time, and me personally, I said, look, it will be Crimea, it will be Transnistria. Crimea already happened, it will be some other frozen conflicts.
Crimea, which Donald Trump has indicated he's minded to recognize Russian sovereignty.
I doubt he will do that, frankly speaking, because that would be in odds I cannot imagine. We have to respect, world order. If somebody undermines that order, it's a big threat, not just for us.
Listening to you, Minister, and I mean this with the greatest respect, some may say that you sound like a man in denial.
Why denial? Why?
You say to me, I put to you these various things that Trump has said, one of which was that he could imagine in the future recognizing Russian sovereignty over Crimea, and you just say, I refuse to think about it.
No, I didn't say that. Why I'm saying? I'm just trying to invite you to wait a bit until the administration will come in, give a chance for them to deliver something, and then we will judge. Now, it would be counterproductive to prejudge or to conclude or to make a panic or say shock, or whatever. It's not helpful. If we need to preserve what was invested, what was done together for the sake of each other, not at the expense of each other, by the way. I mean both sides of ocean. It's really, it will come. And I know that there are nuances. I know there were statements we were not happy, if you're asking about that. But they were electoral campaign. Now it's a bit different, and we know from our experience
well, as you say, it's now quite a few days since the election result became clear. We've had some key appointments, like General Michael Flynn, another man who says he wants to reset relations with Moscow. I just am interested to know whether any of these people have reached out to your government since the election
Directly
victory.
to us on behalf of Trump team. There were some congressmen sending some messages, I remember, saying that, look, if something will happen, it was addressed to Baltic states and Poland, we will be there, Trump will be there if necessary. There were some statements. I don't know, there was not direct contacts, if you're asking about the direct contacts.
No? Is that a bit disappointing?
Well, let's not jump to any conclusion. It's not professional to be disappointed. It's professional to be focused and to gain on for what we'd like to see.
All right, well, if it's not professional to be disappointed, let me not express disappointment, but some surprise that you, after having told me everything about the need for NATO to be strong, to stick together, to show a clear message to Vladimir Putin, how many troops does your country actually provide right now to the NATO Rapid Response Force?
Well, we're providing not just to NATO Response Force, we also have our own Rapid Reaction Force.
I know, but please answer the question. How many do you actually provide to the NATO Response Force?
We are sending up to 1,000, even more sometimes.
As I understood it from the reading I've done, you currently provide just over 200 infantry troops.
It depends when. But we have our own...
Doesn't sound like very many, 200.
We have to 2,500 our own rapid reaction
Yeah, but that's different. But
why
this is about a contribution to NATO. No, I know, but it's the whole point about NATO. NATO is demanding much greater solidarity.
Okay, we are a small country. Our total size of our force is really not big. Nobody expects quantity, expects quality. So we're providing very high quality special troops. They are active in the operations in Afghanistan, and you can ask those with whom they are cooperating, and they are very, very highly assessing that performance. So the quality of what we are providing is really sufficient in my view, really. Quantity definitely will not be impressive, but it's not our goal. We have to contribute, as you said, but also do ourselves. You shouldn't neglect what I said, 2,500 national rapid reaction troops. I understand that. It's the same segment, just maybe also our contribution to our own security.
We've talked a lot about NATO, and of course we've talked a lot about the United States after the Trump victory. Let's now focus, before we end, on Europe itself.
Yes.
It seems to me you've got a big problem in Europe as well, because for all of your appeals for European solidarity, there are a number of governments and a number of political parties in Europe that are showing increasing signs of getting disaffected from sanctions on Russia and are beginning to make noises saying we should have a much warmer relationship with Moscow. Why do you think this is happening inside Europe?
Oh, many reasons. In short time, difficult to disclose, but I can provide you some examples. When we are talking about our legacy, about our experience, right, how we feel, how we assess the situation, it's one story. When talking Western Europe, which is living more or
Well,
less...
this isn't just Western Europe. I'm thinking Hungary. I'm thinking Bulgaria, which has just elected a president who has said, let's end the sanctions against Moscow.
There are some politicians who are speaking, but in Bulgaria we have parliament, there's a government, there are other forces. It's not the only one man who is creating the situation in these countries. But the problem is, and you quite rightly noticed, and this is applicable to Europe and also overseas, that populism taking over and people not listening to the arguments. They're taking decisions by emotions. And all politicians should feel responsible for that.
Why do you think it is that populism involves, in some countries, a support for warmer relations with Putin?
Lack of leadership, reacting not in time, but too late, too little, missing the target. And you didn't want to touch up Aleppo, but let me mention simply why we are talking. Summits, family photos, organizations in charge, right? United Nations, name it. And people being killed, women, children, as we speak. So people are frustrated. They do not believe in peace order in the world. They do not believe in these organizations. And it's applicable to the governments, to the people in lead. And they're punishing their governments. And when they're voting for referendum or elections, they're punishing current governments, not necessarily voting for the question which is raised during referendum. It's something we have to address very seriously. Otherwise, we will lose the catch, everywhere. And this is really big symptoms of big disease.
See, there are intelligence officials in the United States and in Europe too, and commentators who say that Russia's playing a very clever game here. They're using information, propaganda, other forms of reach out to people and parties in Europe.
I can say more. In conventional warfare, there was artillery attack before real battle, usually on the eve. Now it's no need to use artillery. You can brainwash and then to send troops. Brainwash.
Well, that's a big word. You're saying Moscow has a program of brainwashing Europeans?
It was done in Crimea. Before annexing Crimea, it brainwashed the people by state-controlled media, spreading lies. It's a big weapon, which is not yet estimated by all of us.
You're saying they're doing the same thing in Europe?
Everywhere, also in UK, in France, in Italy.
Evidence. Give me evidence.
If people are complacent of what they're doing, if there are ideas, let's not do something because it's provocative. Let's not say it too sharp because it's provocative. It's wrong. Non-doing is provocative. Not acting when you need to act is provocative.
Yeah, but you used the word brainwashing, and I'm not hearing any evidence of brainwashing.
In Crimea, people were convinced by state media that bandits and fascists coming from Kiev to kill them. It was well known. We know that from our sources. They really were scared, and they welcomed Russian soldiers who came to save them. This is the effect of the massive psychological attack.
But
that's brainwashing. It's what is that? How it could be called in your view?
Yeah, but what I see no evidence from your answers is brainwashing in Europe. There have been allegations. For example, a Russian bank gave Marine Le Pen's party some money. I've discussed it with her. She said very plainly, "I just wanted the money." It was nothing.
If party is financed by sources from outside, and it's okay for people. It's fine with everyone, really. So resilience is really very, very low. Or if you have referendum in some country taking hostage Ukraine, as it was in Netherlands, for instance.
So you see this as part of a pattern?
Also people, we're starting to realize something when it comes close, personally, as it was MH17 disaster. Safeguard these lessons. But if you agree, after MH17, thinking was different than before. Why? Because it happened here, not somewhere else. And we have to understand that if something happening in Europe, even it's far away, it's our continent.
But we must end, but maybe we should end with this thought. Isn't the truth, everything we've discussed, from the triumph of Trump, the messages he's delivering, the divisions within the European family and within NATO, isn't the truth that right now it looks as though Vladimir Putin is getting his way?
He's always getting his way because he's just testing, probing, testing whether we will react. If react, how we will react. If no reaction, so he's continues to do what he has to do, and that's his method. So it's just applicable all the time, all regions of conflicts.
So you are still very afraid.
But it would be wrong if I may correct your question that it's just for us. It's our problem. You're always saying Baltic problem. It's our own problem. Time will come and we'll see ourselves. But how many wake-up calls needed to wake up? It depends on personality, right? So better to wake up when it is time to wake up.
We have to end there, but Linas Linkevicius, thank you very much for being on Hard Talk.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Minister.
Thanks.